The 5 Supreme Court judges spent most of day one listening to Dorothy Bain KC. Now, she is the Scottish Government's top legal officer, and she spent the morning setting out to the Supreme Court why it should even listen to this case in the first place. Now, there were discussions between Supreme Court judges and Dorothy Bain about the Scotland Act from 1998, which sets out the terms of devolution, and in that piece of legislation there is a list of criteria that have to be met by cases which are then referred to the Supreme Court. Now, the list mentions nothing about a referendum, but it does have one sentence which says any other question arising by virtue of the Scotland Act about reserved matters. Dorothy Bain saying that any other question phrase is the reason why this case can be referred to the Supreme Court. Now, she also made the political case for listening to this issue and deciding one way or the other whether the Scottish Government can legislate for a referendum without Westminster's say-so. She produced documentation such as Scotland's right to choose, which is the Scottish Government's case that Brexit has changed the argument for independence. She also mentioned the SNP's 2021 manifesto and various quotes from various debates in Parliament, in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords. She also stressed that any referendum that would be held would be advisory. It would not be legally binding, and that in the same way the 2016 Brexit referendum resulted in years of negotiations and changes to legislation to separate the UK from the EU, so too Scotland would have to go through that process. And so any independence referendum would only be advisory and not legally binding. Then towards the end of the day, we heard from James Eadie KC. He's the lawyer representing the UK government, and he, to paraphrase, essentially told the Supreme Court judges that any legislation that were to be passed would be unknown, that until it actually makes its way through the Scottish Parliament, the Supreme Court judges wouldn't know the facts. Now, Lord Stevens, who's one of the Supreme Court judges, said surely any legislation such as this specific one is going to be passed in a pro-majority independence Scottish Parliament, to which James Eadie KC replied, people might have different views, MPs have not yet voted, the mere fact there is a government majority may lead to that result, and it may not. So James Eadie KC, a very highly respected, savvy lawyer, trying to plant that seed of doubt in the Supreme Court judges' minds, and essentially saying, look, you can't pass a sound judgment when you don't know all the facts. So that's what's happened on day one. Day two, we'll hear the rest of the case put forward by the UK government as to why they think that power, when it comes to the power to hold an independence referendum in Scotland, why that power resides with Westminster and not with Holyrood.